Welcome to the Thriving Misfits, the podcast where we celebrate resilience, embrace diversity, and challenge norms. I'm your host, Fiona Young, and in today's episode, I'm speaking with Qi Zhai-McCartney, a couples therapist, coach, and former finance professional whose career has spanned continents and industries, so from Wall Street to wellness. Qi has lived in and worked in 8 countries, bringing in a global and grounded perspective to her work with high-achieving individuals and couples now. And she is based in Singapore and is running Seeing Qi Therapy and Coaching, helping people align their inner lives with their outer success. So drawing on her own IVF journey and expertise in perinatal mental health, Qi brings warmth, insight, and emotional intelligence to the complex conversations we often shy away from. And whether it's about ambition, infertility, love, or life transitions. So I believe this conversation is full of heart, honesty, and hard-earned wisdom, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So welcome, Qi.
Thank you, Fiona. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here.
I personally also had experience with therapy before. I struggled with an eating disorder for 2 decades, and I've seen therapists in the States and in Germany, in Hong Kong. And I found someone who has gone through the whole eating disorder journey as well. She recovered. But I felt that because she has gone through it herself, it was somewhat projecting her narrative, her journey onto me. And you have struggled with, fertility. You've gone through IVF. How did your personal IVF journey influence now your professional life, especially as a therapist, and you're coaching and supporting others through their life transitions? How does that influence how you conduct your therapy sessions?
Yeah, I think you bring up a very good point, and it's something that in therapy school we are trained and address very early on, and you constantly address: are you projecting? Are you projecting? Right? The experience is that of your clients and not your own. To answer your question, my IVF journey personally actually all happened. It began in my finance career and it ended with the birth of my last baby and kind of the end of our IVF journey. So professionally, it was actually just the stress. Logistically, I had business trips scheduled a year in advance, and IVF, as you know, is so heavily scheduled. It depends on your menstrual cycle. It's so regimented. You get blood tests, ultrasound scans, all done on certain days. Your hormone stimulation medications need to be taken on a specific day at a specific time. If you go through all that work, but you miss the timing of the trigger shot, you've just put your body through an artificially stimulated overproduction of eggs for, a couple of weeks for nothing. So the toughest parts of my journey professionally were really trying to have a child without losing my job. I remember setting alarms to wake up at 3 a.m. in London so I could inject myself on Asia time. I was calculating how long my long haul flights were and how many ice packs I need to keep my medication from going bad when I was flying. With the therapy part, I think what I try to do is IVF already comes with so many unwelcome advice giving on the medical front. Like, people are always offering, trying to be helpful, but really it's not helpful, right? This is one of my IVF talk tips. Don't give advice. People are always like, oh, did you try TCM? Did you try this? Did you try that? Me, what I try to do is really shine a light on the potential potholes on the road so that my clients can choose which path they walk, knowing that there may be difficulties. I try to reduce the expectation to reality gap. I don't try to, tell them or suggest, have you seen this doctor? Have you taken that supplement? I really say, like, oh, what are you doing to stay emotionally connected, right? How in the past have you handled difficult news or grief? Kind of dropping little breadcrumbs for them to start, having this idea that it may not be a smooth journey. And the more we know that it won't be smooth, the more easily we'll be able to handle it, and to kind of remind them to stay together, because I'm just a temporary presence in my clients' lives, but it's the two of them who hopefully will live 10, 20, 50 years together after the travesty of IVF.
I mean, I've also educated myself on IVF after the first miscarriage, and after the first miscarriage, we tried it naturally. I've gone to acupuncture and everything.
Yeah.
change my eating habits. At that time I was a pescatarian, and then I started introducing meat
Red.
because
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
doctor was saying I should eat more red meat.
Yeah.
And then I looked into IVF, and it just sounded just so stressful to me that I told my
Yeah.
husband, either we try it naturally, we continue trying that naturally, but I don't see ourselves going through IVF. I just don't see, even though I was running my own business and having that flexibility, but I just couldn't see myself and ourselves to kind of manage that. As you said, when you
Yeah.
travel, then you also have to calculate. And there's just so much, now, as a mom, I understand we also have the mental mom load.
Calculate. Yeah. How much milk? How much ice? Pumping, all that. Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about, when do I need to get him to nap in order for him to wake up at that time? And then, so all that
Yeah.
mom math, right? So I actually
Yeah.
shied away from going through the IVF journey. I found it
Yeah.
extremely challenging. And you talked
Yeah.
about, partnership. It's not just going through the IVF, but, you know, I realized that some of the couples are trying to mend their relationship by having a
With a
child.
baby. Yes.
I'm
And
just
everyone
thinking,
who's had a child can tell you it is the biggest breaker of relationships, right?
yes,
And the
it's
research bears that out. Two-thirds of marriages experience a precipitous drop in marital satisfaction after the arrival of a child. And the
absolutely.
recovery is something like 7 years, but a huge chunk of those two-thirds will not recover ever. And then, I see clients who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They have been harboring the childcare inequity for many, many decades.
That resentment stays with you if you're not openly talking about it. And I think
Yeah.
also for our generation, I'm constantly hearing from, my parents' generation that we should be grateful for all these amazing men in our lives who are a little bit
Who are helping. Yeah. Yeah.
more
Yeah.
involved. And yes, they
Yeah.
are, but
Yeah.
so are we are juggling multiple balls, which our
Yeah.
mom's generation didn't have to. And I think what's most important is that
Yeah.
they did have a village to support them, whereas I feel
For sure.
a lot of grandparents these days, they're just out and about, they want to have their own social lives. And so it's as you mentioned, this is the partnership is, that's
Yeah.
the foundation. And how do you think partners can support each other even better during, not only during the IVF or the fertility journey, but also afterwards?
Um, I think, we're talking about feminism and gender, right? And I think my and many of my couples clients experience is that it was really fertility, the prospect of bringing life to the world and actually having a baby that cemented their experience as a man or as a woman. Because up until that point, you are kind of equal, right? Oh, everybody can go to university. Sure, there's a pay gap for the same job done between a man and a woman, but on the surface, we have kind of solved so many of these problems. But going back to your mother's mental load thing, I say in my talk about family planning and feminism that the best husband is doing 49% of the execution, right? And that's just the execution. That is not touching the conceptualization and the planning that is required before the task is there for the doing. So one of the difficult things is a helpful husband will never get to 50%. Having a child and being married, looking after the household, going through IVF, none of these tasks will ever be fully equal. And that 49% for me is just a way of illustrating that the men can participate, but so much of these are fundamentally feminine, biological, emotional, and mental experiences. So one of my recommendations to couples to staying connected is not tell me what to do, I will do it, right? When couples start IVF, most of the time before their first cycle, it's the woman who has done all the research, who's gone on the forums, who has chosen the doctor. And the husband often will be in session saying something that I know is like just a sign of ignorance, right? They'll be like, yeah, right. And then we just go and it's done. And it's like, okay, already you are falling behind. And that carries through every stage. When you're pregnant, what to do, what not to do. When you are nursing, how to wean. When you're sleep training, how to sleep train. So my suggestion is don't try to be helpful by asking, how can I help? Do the research, really own the project. And I know men are so capable of this in their jobs, right? Approach it with that proactive attitude. If somebody gave you a brief and no direction, would you go to your boss and say, okay, tell me which task I should do next and I'll do it? You wouldn't. You would actually go out, think about it, research it, and then come up with the tasks yourself. So that's one thing. The second thing that often happens along gendered lines is that women need to process emotions more verbally, and we're actually just looking for a sounding board. We don't need a solution. But men are socialized to be problem solvers, to be fixers. And when there's something they can't change, like a miscarriage or an unfavorable IVF outcome, they kind of just shy away and emotionally avoid the conversation. Don't do that, right? Do not shut down the conversation by offering a solution. Ask for what your partner needs. Do you need to be heard, right? Do you want me to just listen? Do you need a hug? Because sometimes no amount of talk can replace the physical comfort, right? Or do you want solutions? Do you want to brainstorm together? So have those conversations, because the difficult conversations, just like the joyful conversations, are what keep you connected. When you stop talking because there is nothing that can be done, you also stop being a team, because now you're each in your own subjective emotional experience alone. And those are the memories of loneliness and resentment that you will recall as you age together.
Right. And I mean, like, I talk to my friends about all these things, right? We're complaining about our husbands. And then sometimes it feels like we've all married the same guy.
It's all man. Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, yeah, just make me a list, right? A shopping list. I'm like, just go through the fridge and see what else is missing. Be proactive, as what you just mentioned, right?
Exactly. So in my therapy and coaching practice, we have very structured ways for making sure you're doing this, right? I don't expect men to have been taught a certain way for all their lives and then suddenly, because two of us have talked about you should just stay connected, know how to do that. So there are exercises that we recommend people do daily, weekly, bi-monthly, so that you do stay on the same page, both with the administrative execution tasks of a life together and on the emotional side. So I definitely encourage people to seek out the resources. I have a lot of instructional videos on my social media accounts. And so many companies now cover mental health counseling. So go and have a session. You don't have to be in dire straits or something is terribly wrong for you to learn a couple of tips. We're so proactive about upskilling in work. Why don't we upskill on relationships too?
I guess there's still a little bit of a stigma there, right?
So much. A little bit, so much, yeah.
I mean, not only you're talking about relationship, but therapy in general. I don't know about, maybe, just have a look at your client base.
Yeah.
Are they more female or male, right? I feel like maybe the wives are
Yeah.
dragging the husbands to the
Yeah,
therapy.
so the majority of couples therapy is instigated by the wife. And when it goes well, because often therapy doesn't go well, you really have to find somebody. It's a little bit like dating, right? It's so
Yes.
intimate to find somebody that gets you and clicks with you as a couple. But when it does go well, the men, I find, and I work with a lot of men in my practice, the men buy into it wholeheartedly, and they really dedicate the level of, rigor that they dedicate to their professional development, to personal development. So it is possible. But you're right. Majority of people who instigate are women. And when I started in this career, I actually thought, because I lived and worked in New York for so many times, where everybody's like, oh, I have a shrink, I have a therapist, oh, my therapist is coming to my wedding, that it's so open. I thought maybe in Asia, I would mostly be seeing, foreign expat or overseas clients. But increasingly, right, in this part of the world, Southeast Asia, as incomes are going up, as people are educated abroad or work in multinational settings, the openness to counseling and therapy and coaching is there. So my client split is about half, but the commonality is people who feel multicultural, either because they somebody who's outside of their race, culture, or language system, or they work in an environment, or they have lived abroad and now they don't feel like they 100%, identify with being Chinese or Singaporean or Malaysian or American, right? People realize they're patchwork. This was not the case for our parents' generation. So a lot of the things that we need to cope with contemporary life and thrive in contemporary life, we have to learn for ourselves. And there are professional resources and people you can go to for that help. Just because you weren't raised with it doesn't mean you have to go without it.
Absolutely. Now, you gave the men quite a few tips and recommendations what they can do in their relationships. And
Yeah.
I don't only want to do men or husband bashing, right? So what can we women or wives, what can we do differently to also ensure that we can cultivate that healthy relationship?
Definitely. So the number one cross gender issue that I see, especially in this part of the world, is emotional avoidance. Because we grew up in families that, really were focused on getting into a better financial situation or maybe getting to a place that is not a war zone, right? Like these are very real survival issues for our parents or grandparents' generation. We didn't grow up with family cultures of talking about things. So we don't even know what that looks like. And we don't know that when something makes us unhappy or we feel like there's a difference between us and someone we love, we don't feel like we can even approach it and bring it to the table, but somehow we're able to do that at work, right? If you're at a negotiating table and somebody makes you an offer that you don't like, you wouldn't just take it, right? You would say something about it. So, number one, I recommend everybody to kind of examine, are you keeping the peace? Are you easygoing? Do you not dwell on things? These are the common phrases that clients use, which indicate that they may actually be emotionally avoidant and conflict avoidant. Some conflict is good, right? Difficult conversations and constructive conflict helps you identify the root cause of problems so you can do it better next time. So that's for both men and women. For women specifically, especially in traditional cultures, we are raised to be pleasers. We are raised to be agreeable. If you're the biggest sister at home, you're the eldest born girl, you're taught to be responsible and make life easy for other people. So
Mm.
we have a really hard time voicing what we need. But not voicing what we need doesn't mean it just goes away. Many of us then become passive aggressive and resentful, right? We start saying things like, after all these years, he should know me. Or why should I have to tell him? If I tell him that it's not genuine, it's not coming from him. Scrap all of these unhelpful thoughts, right? We don't even know our own minds sometimes. We don't know what we want until sufficient time has passed and we have thought through it and experimented. How can we expect a whole other living, breathing human being with his own problems to magically know what you need? So if your husband or partner hasn't given you something that you want, why don't you ask for it? Ask for it kindly and clearly, right? If you start talking about something and then he says, "Oh, did you try this?" and you don't feel like your feelings were comforted, but the conversation was shut down, don't shrink back, like a timid animal. Step back in and say, "Hang on a minute, sometimes your advice is really valuable, especially when I talk to you about my job. But right now, I think I just want you to, give me a hug and let me talk. I think I just want to
Mm.
process verbally." Ask for what you want. It's okay. And in fact, majority of the partners tell me they love that.
Mm.
They don't want to guess. They actually want to be given a clear and specific manual.
Absolutely. And I've also heard, I mean, great advice, by the way. And I've also heard that what some couples are trying out is to, so when one of the partners starting to share with them about a story or, something that's going on, a challenge, then the first question they would ask each other is this something that requires a hug, or do you want advice? Right. Or do you
Yeah,
need someone to listen to you? So I think it's just kind of like
exactly. Check with each other. What do you
communicating.
need, right?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, I can talk to you forever. I have
Right.
one last question here. You know, uh, is there anything that you would want to say to someone who is quietly struggling with infertility right now?
Yeah. The experience of loneliness, rejection, and social ostracism for human beings, when we study this in laboratory settings, it is the emotional and mental impact is registered the same way as a physical punch to the chest. And so many people quietly struggling are thinking, "I am alone. Nobody else understands this." And I just want to say that you are not alone, right? After you start opening up, which this was my experience, after I started opening up about IVF, I realized that everybody around me had either been through a miscarriage, a loss, infertility, or they knew somebody who had done it. I know opening up is hard. You don't know who to trust. You don't want to burden others. Maybe you're embarrassed. But I
Hmm.
really encourage clients in therapy and coaching sessions to conduct a small experiment. Design your experiment in vulnerability. So pick a level 3 personal and difficult thing, right? Don't go to level 10. Don't go to your first coworker lunch, I'm going to try being vulnerable and say, I'm going through IVF and it's not working, right? You don't have to. You can. Some people are comfortable with that, but you don't have to. Pick 1 to 3 people that you think you might want to open up about something, and pick like a low level problem, like, oh gosh, my husband forgot to tell me he was going on business again. So now I'm stuck, scheduling this or that in his absence. When you share something with somebody, you're inviting them, you're opening the door and saying, come on in. And you will know pretty quickly if they're like, oh, I've been dying for somebody to open up to me about this. And then they walk in the door right away. They will reciprocate with a sharing. The people who are, less comfortable, they won't. So then you haven't lost much, right? You've given them a level 3 intimacy or difficult problem. Experiment until you identify somebody that you can really be your unfiltered true self. And that is the person that might carry you through your IVF, infertility, or whatever life challenges you're going through. Many people I know who went through multiple rounds of IVF had an IVF buddy. That person may not be your best friend forever, but that person may be your most important moral support for that season. You are not alone, and dare to reach out because somebody will reciprocate.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm probably the one who's going to just be blasting that news to my just a neighbor randomly. I found it much easier to speak or to share about my miscarriages to someone who is not so close to me. I'm not sure why that is. Is this also something that you've experienced from your therapy sessions?
Yeah, I think it's similar to how, I can listen to incredibly difficult stories in my therapy sessions with couples when there's infidelity or, financial deception, big issues, without breaking down and crying because I am emotionally removed. I have very little vested interest. I can actually focus entirely on them rather than how this might affect me. So I can understand why you don't want to talk to a family member, right? If it's a parent, they're like more worried about your well-being, or they're like terrified they won't have grandchildren. But if you talk to a neighbor, they're not vested in the outcome. So they can actually be a little bit more detached and hold space for you better rather than injecting their feelings and projecting their issues onto your moment.
Yes, but I mean the whole the key that you've just mentioned is really about opening up and being okay to be vulnerable and not feel that you're alone in this. And it's sad, but 1 in 4 women are going through miscarriage or had a miscarriage. So it is much more common than we think.
It is much more common. Yeah. And I do also want to go back to one of your earlier points, which is giving yourself the information and arming yourself with choice, even if you think you don't want to have children. So statistically, the majority of women won't be able to conceive naturally between the ages of 38 and 42. We are not told that, right? Pop culture, the media, everyone is telling us that you kind of need to worry at 40. But really, I have 3 daughters right now, and I would tell all of them at age 30 to go get a blood test, a simple reading of your AMH and your FSH, which gives you a rough gauge on how healthy your eggs are, right? What is your egg reserve? I did that at 34 after a friend of mine, recommended doing it. And I was shocked. I was told that even though I was a part-time yoga teacher, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I don't drink coffee, I don't drink tea. I have a very healthy lifestyle, that my eggs at 34 look like those of a 40-year-old. And I was told to get started right away if you know for sure that you want to have biological children. So this whole idea, I think when the egg freezing thing became very popular, around 2014, after the big tech companies in the US started operating as a benefit, women were going in at 35. That is actually not the best time, right? You really want to be going in between 30 and 35. 35 is when, you have one cliff, and then 40 is like another cliff. So get informed early, know your options. So many people say they didn't want children, but when the possibility of having children runs out at 38, 39, 40, they start thinking about it. And then they're faced with an even bigger shock, which is you thought you didn't want it and now you want it. Guess what? You can't have it.
Definitely. Story of my life. Now, that's a wrap on today's conversation with a truly inspiring voice in the world of modern relationships. From Qi's impressive career journey from finance to wellness and her personal experience with IVF, she offers such a unique perspective on aligning our inner lives with our outer success. Her insights into couples therapy, career life planning, and navigating the complexities of relationships, both at work and at home, are incredibly valuable. So if you're looking for ways to create more harmony in your personal and professional life, Qi's work is something to definitely keep in mind. So be sure to check out her practice, Seeing Qi, Therapy and Coaching in Singapore, and keep up with her thoughts on relationships and mental health on Instagram. To all our listeners, if this episode resonates with you, please take a moment to subscribe to the Thriving Misfits podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in this conversation, make sure you rate and review the podcast. It really helps more misfits like you to find us and start their own journey of growth. And of course, please share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. And let's spread the word and empower more people to thrive in their uniqueness. So thank you for tuning in. And remember, keep thriving, embrace your authenticity, and let's continue this journey of growth together.